Good morning. Welcome to all. Thanks for joining this afternoon's symposium session on communications for social justice in the digital age. My name is Ember Charles. I'm the president of WACC Global, and I'll be guiding you for the remainder of the day. This session forms part of the day's theme, public space. Our topic, in fact, our question is, in what ways has digital era changed the notion of public space? The response to the question is the basis of our discussion and presentation for the remainder of the day. However, over the past few weeks, WAC convened a small working group facilitated by Jody Matire to dig into the subject matter and unearth the related theories, the practices, and the principles related to the topic. A position paper has been prepared, and certainly that will be shared at the appropriate time. Out of this exercise, we will share some of that work in the first hour of this afternoon session. And this is how we intend to proceed. The main presentation will start with a look at the global context. Secondly, we will share 4 case studies which are designed to illuminate theory and practice. And thirdly, some actions are proposed for consideration to address the issues raised. While there is a lot to share, we will provide the opportunity for discussions, though limited oral interventions, but extensively through the electronic platforms which are available throughout the conference. So it may be now, or you can also pose your questions when it's convenient. Our discussion takes off from existing research and our recently created definition of public spaces. And I'll just read that definition for you. Democratic public communication spaces are spaces for considered dialogue, both analog and digital, that would explicitly strengthen excluded voices, guarantee citizens the right to own and control their data, information, and knowledge, free from commercial, state, or other co-option, and contribute to, uphold, and validate social justice, communication rights, and the common good. Following the first hour of presentation by the WAC working group, we go into breakout sessions. Then we return to plenary, where we will view some summaries of case studies which showcase some good practice with regards to public spaces. It is the expectation that we will come out of today's sessions with some proposals for action by civil society in particular, but also for like-minded agencies in the corporate and state sectors. We are reminded that there is interpretation in French, Spanish, and German, and you may use the chat room to pose questions and comments. We are in a multilingual space, so I'm advising you to speak slowly so the interpreters can have the apt time to interpret effectively for the other language users. So the first part of our presentation will be done by Dennis Smith, who for the past decades studied, written, and walked the mission on issues related to faith, communications, and culture. Dennis Smith recently retired as the Presbyterian Congregation USA Regional Liaison for South America. He's a former president of WAC. And most of his published works looks at the conversation between religion, media, and culture in Latin America. Regrettably, we pulled Dennis out of his retirement and being with his family to share his wisdom, which we know he has a lot of. So join me in welcoming Dennis to make his presentation. Dennis, over to you.
Thank you, Embert. In this brief introduction, I will attempt to synthesize many hours of conversation by the small working group that was convened by WACC to prepare this seminar. Our thanks to the participants in this working group for their willingness to share their experience and insights. Since time unremembered, humankind has used language, gesture, and other symbolic systems to create meaning in common. From these distant beginnings to today's emerging social media platforms, competing power elites have struggled to control access to and dictate the terms of distribution of these systems. Economic elites have sought to dominate them for profit and competitive advantage. Religions have sought to sacralize them, designating gatekeepers to control access to the sacred. Political and military elites have sought to set the terms of public discourse and to define the limits of acceptable expression so that they can consolidate, protect, and expand their own power. We have come to describe these spaces where communities create meaning in common as public space. These are the spaces where a community develops their understanding of the common good, building a life together, exploring ethical values and experimenting with aesthetics, but also sharing information and analysis as people hold one another accountable, debate, and advocate for public policy. While those in power have always sought to exert hegemony over the systems humankind has used to create meaning in common for their own benefit, no attempt to control public space has ever been completely successful. Today's digital, online, and legacy media platforms, even when they are privately owned and operated to promote the interests of sectarian groups, are still public spaces where human communities express the creative impulse and question what it means to belong. When elites attempt to control public space, it is not uncommon for them to stigmatize or even criminalize difference. In such contexts, to be excluded from public space is to be silenced, to be made invisible. Nevertheless, humankind has always found ways to resist tyranny and dream other realities into existence. Today, these platforms are dominated by a neoliberal consumerist ideology that defines the value of human beings as being a function of everyone's ability to consume an ever-increasing amount of goods and services. Such an emphasis on the individual and their capacity to consume has contributed to a social imaginary where both the powerful and the powerless are consumed by the power of capital. The consumer society spawns a culture of desire, or more frequently, of mere titillation disguised as desire, that dangles before individuals the promise of instant gratification and cultivates seductive visions of achieving satisfaction and well-being through the act of consumption. Neoliberal consumerist ideas are so deeply embedded in many communities today that many people and the political leaders who represent them cannot conceive that other value systems are possible. Global trends indicate an increased sense of tribalism, manifested in suspicion and fear of the other. In such circumstances, it can become difficult to even contemplate interaction outside of one's tribe. Not surprisingly, the breakdown of common public space has contributed to the breakdown of many communities' ability to imagine the common good. In a consumer society, as digital conglomerates consolidate their control over large-scale data collection and manipulation, both individual persons and communities become the subjects of forms of manipulation in which, almost from birth, they are exposed to feedback and confirmation loops in public spaces, although these spaces are privately shaped and controlled, in which our character, belief, and aspiration are formed. In this context, we must ask, who is our community? Traditionally, our communities are the groups with which we collectively interact in a public space. Indeed, these interactions are what create the public space. Here we ask, how are the boundaries of membership set? Who sets the rules of engagement? How does the community decide what issues are to be raised and how they must be decided? As communities learn to navigate these issues in the emerging media ecosystem, they have learned that the social media now reign supreme. The problem is not the social media per se, but that the driving force behind them is the maximization of profits and thus the monetization of all human attempts to create meaning in common. Instead of people being able to organically shape public spaces, including through trial and error, they are driven and deliberately manipulated by this consumerist ethic. While social media create the possibilities of all kinds of new public image, the possibilities of all kinds of new public spaces to emerge, those that emerge tend to be infected with this mercenary virus, shaping the space and thus also the communities that are shaped by them. This dual process of both creating new forms of digital public space and polluting it in specific ways also exerts major influence over existing non-digital public spaces. In the most practical sense, existing media, many of which are also manifestations of an earlier generation of corporate elites, are strongly affected by their loss of income. By hijacking traditional income streams, especially advertising, emerging digital platforms weaken the legacy media. One notable result has been to limit the creation of news, narrowing the range of sources available to communities to deepen their understanding of the wider world, precisely the world in which they must learn to discern the flow of power and to build alliances as they seek to apply democratic principles and build the common good. Now that most of humankind has access to digital and online social media, the stakes for excluded and minority sectors of society are high. As the ownership and control of these media has been consolidated in the hands of a tiny number of global corporations, their owners have grown more powerful than nation states. To be excluded from such spaces means not only to lose access to the cultural commons where communities build their identities, but also implies the risk of physical annihilation. To be silenced, to be made invisible, can be a death sentence. Whether we are speaking of the indigenous peoples of the Amazon defending their lands from usurpation, the Uyghur community in Xinjiang, African American young people insisting that Black Lives Matter, or non-binary youth discovering and celebrating their identity, to know oneself as a member of a community with common interests and common struggles, and for such communities to be able to represent themselves and their point of view is quite literally a matter of life or death. As a member of an excluded social group, one quickly discovers that today's social media landscapes can be rife with carefully crafted manipulation and lies, caustic rumors, hate speech, and fear-mongering. From the outside looking in, excluded individuals and communities discover that they are not white enough, heterosexual enough, young enough, thin enough, or with sufficient disposable income to match the projected ideal. Transcending the personal, power elites have learned to use the social media as tools of disinformation for the manipulation of public opinion, to exacerbate existing social divisions and prejudice, and to provoke violent confrontations that consolidate their hold on power. Theologians note that the current neoliberal consumerist system functions very much as a voracious, bloodthirsty idol that demands human sacrifice. To cast the excluded, the silenced, those made invisible onto the garbage heap of history is justified by the elites as collateral damage in their drive to perpetuate the current system. The author of the New Testament letter to the Ephesians describes this almost mystical power in this way. Our struggle is not against enemies of blood and flesh, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers of this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. The growing power of the social media over public space also demonstrates new forms of corporate capture of government functions and responsibilities, as city planning, medicine, education, communication infrastructure, transport, and governance generally are only very slowly waking up to the potential of artificial intelligence and the use of data to improve services and create new ones. These corporations are moving into these government sectors, offering free data and services, just like social media do to individuals, but with the price of impunity and freedom from existing regulatory frameworks. Yet, these key government functions and services each act like a miniature public space, bringing people together to provide shared services, enabling people to interact, and even these little eddies of interaction are being occupied by digital corporations, closing off small but vital conversations within and between communities and between communities and government, and subtly imposing new ways of operating which further empower these corporations and erect barriers between people. Despite all the very real limitations of this emerging media landscape, we must remember that the very existence of social media has changed the way many people, particularly the younger generations, think about media, having moved from a largely passive process to one that is essentially interactive. Even if only a minority of those that consume social media produce content, it's a much larger group than what the legacy media have accustomed us to. The long-term impact of all this is hard to foresee, but it's unlikely to return to the top-down, unidirectional model characteristic of traditional media. This may lead to a reshaping of the public sphere and of people's expectations in which a greater level of participation, a sort of democratic renaissance, becomes the new normal. The character of that participation and the possibility of it contributing to a more just and sustainable society will clearly depend on factors of social and political organization that go beyond the digital realm. The pandemic and the climate ecological crisis have further polarized our societies between extreme individualism on the one hand, and on the other, a greater awareness of the need for community, as well as the importance of public services and policies in defense of the common good. This is likely to be a major confrontation in the coming years. As the ecumenical movement and as participants in civil society, we are called to defend access to and defend the integrity of public space as uniquely important in developing a shared vision of the common good. This is not easy in the current system, when corporations exert unprecedented dominance over the economy, politics, and culture, but it is both urgent and necessary. Thus, we are committed to participate in the creation of democratic public communication spaces, spaces for considered dialogue, both analog and digital, that would explicitly strengthen excluded voices, guarantee citizens the right to own and control their data, information, and knowledge free from commercial, state, or other co-option, and contribute to uphold and validate social justice, communication rights, and the common good. Thank you, Ember.
Thank you very much, Dennis. I think we should all give Dennis a round of applause for this excellent presentation. A very thought-provoking, very deep, filled with his own wisdom, as we know him to do. And of course, Dennis raises a number of questions, which I'm sure that some of you may want to comment on, briefly, as our time is very tight in the first hour. So perhaps we can take the next couple of minutes. If there are any key questions or burning issues, or anybody wants some clarifications, you can probably just either unmute or raise your hand so that I could invite you to make the comments or maybe say something in the chat. Anyone who has a question? Just unmute your mic. I don't see any. And just speak. No one? I think Dennis has been, some of the questions which Dennis posed to us was the issue of who are the community? What are the community concerns? What is the commons we've been speaking about? Of course, he poses the fundamental dilemma between the social media and also our public space, and whether we can rebalance or rehabilitate that public space with the qualities that social media presents to us right now. So that's just in the interest of time. I think if you don't have questions now, you could always pose them later on.
Suman has a question.
Suman has a question. Suman?
Thank you, Amber. Thank you so much for giving us a grand start to the symposium today, session. And Dennis, thank you very much for those remarks. I think those were really thought-provoking. There's just one issue that came to my mind. In fact, it was a question when I was listening to you. I think we need to ask ourselves, or perhaps come to a common understanding of who is an elite. What I've noticed in my everyday working life is that yesterday's marginalized become today's elite. So I think perhaps we need to look into the characteristics of the elite so as to know what characteristics not to imbibe or to avoid. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Suman. Dennis?
I certainly agree that that is an urgent area for further inquiry. In my own experience in Latin America, I think we need to explore the issue of power, because the question of how power flows, how power is held accountable, and who has the power to lift up or silence voices, who has the power to create or eliminate images, are certainly, it's certainly one of the factors that we need to take into consideration as we explore that issue.
Thank you. And perhaps we also need to disaggregate the concept of elites, because you have elites at different levels. You probably have the economic, political, in fact, you even have the social media elite now, which we have to look at as one of, as we consider that definition of what or who are the elites in our society today. Okay, I'll take another question or another comment. It's a lot to mull over. If we don't have any immediate questions, I don't see any hands. Said if you have to speak, just unmute.
Good morning.
Okay.
Good morning.
Say your name. Yes, I could hear you. We could hear you.
Michael Cooper Cheng from Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Just a quick question. So with your experience working in regulatory environment and government, especially in the Caribbean, how willing do you think governments are to, create an equitable digital environment? Because, I mean, as we've learned from yesterday and today, sometimes governments, it's in their interest to restrict. So from your experience in the Caribbean especially, how do you think, how willing do you think the governments are to make this space more equitable? Thank you.
Thank you. Dennis, I think this question may have been directed at myself.
Exactly. That's your area of involvement. So go ahead.
Okay. I will respond. Yeah. Thank you, Michael. So in response, I'll be very brief. There is a willingness in some cases, but I think they are constrained in a number of cases by the structure and the characteristics of this media landscape that we have inherited. In most cases, because governments have been very shy to take an active part in media and in communications infrastructure, the private sector entities have dominated, and they have literally set the rules by default. So right now, they're literally playing catch up. They're literally the laggers trying to rebalance the situation because of the pressures from the consumers and the voters. So it is something I think they have the will to do, but I think structurally they are constrained. And this is where I think civil society as a sector of the society has to come in and rebalance that situation, which usually tips on the side of corporate entities, which in most cases in the Caribbean influence governments by their support financially and otherwise for some of these political parties who could come into power at some point in time. But they always have the intention to do so, but sometimes they don't even realize what constrains them and usually are very loath to take the advice of those who know. I hope at least that's a brief response, which helps.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you.
Thanks. Okay. So in the interest of time, you can always put your comments in the chat. I think we will proceed with the next section of our presentation. That's a presentation of the WAC Working Group, which is a series of case studies. And while the technical team is lining up the first case study, which is to be presented by Rania Rashad. Rania Rashad, who has done work with a number of NGOs in Egypt. And the case study examines the work of one NGO to combat the prevalence of hate speech in the media, with a focus on Egypt, of course. Rania is a funding manager for the Coptic Evangelical Organization for Social Justice Services in Egypt. Rania is also a board member of WAC Global and an executive member of WAC from the Middle East region. So over to the team for the presentation by Rania Rashad. I think it's the video.
عندنا كلمتين في القاموس العربي متعارضتين، كلمة المحبة وكلمة الكراهية.
إذا إحنا بنرجع بالذاكرة لكل الحروب اللي حدثت في العالم العربي أو العالم أجمع، هنلاقي بيسبق كل هذه الحروب خطاب للكراهية.
نتكلم عن خطاب الكراهية، بنقول أي خطاب يؤدي أو يبث أو يحث على التمييز أو العنف أو العنصرية هو خطاب كراهية. للأسف الشديد مع انتشار السوشيال ميديا دلوقتي في أحاديث كتيرة قوي وخطاب كراهية بيغذي الشباب بشكل كبير جدا.
عبارة عن غياب المحبة. ربنا ما خلقش الكراهية، ده خلق المحبة بين الناس. الخطاب الديني خطاب مهم جدا بالنسبة لينا كمصريين، لأن تأثير رجال الدين على أفراد المجتمع كله معروف إن هو تأثير قوي. لازم المحبة هي اللي تسود، لأن المحبة هي اللي باقية بين الناس وبعضيها. عندنا 3 مصطلحات يحكموا علاقتنا بالآخر. المصطلح الأول التعايش مع الآخر. المصطلح الثاني قبول الآخر. المصطلح الثالث محبة الآخر.
أنت إن كنت مسلم أو مسيحي أو يهودي فهذا معتقدك، لكن الحياة ملك للجميع والوطن ملك للجميع.
برضو أعتقد في موروثنا حاجات كتيرة قوي متعلقة برضو بصور نمطية سلبية عن الآخر المختلف في أي
نتكاتف مع بعض، سواء كان رجال دين أو رجال إعلام. ما نغفلش كمان دور الإعلام اللي هو بيبث لنا مظاهر عنف وكراهية كتير جدا جدا، والبرامج اللي بتظهر الكراهية والعنف.
بعض باليسر واللين، لا فرق بين جار وجار، لا فرق بين أخ وأخ، لا فرق بين مدينة ومدينة، لا فرق بين دين ودين، كل الأديان من عند الله تبارك وتعالى.
فكان عندنا طالبة هنا في إعدادي، كانت الطالبة دي حضرت معانا الندوات، فجت بتقول أنا كنت يعني متخوفة جدا من اخوات المسلمين في البلد، بس بعد الحوار وبعد اللقاءات دي اصبح الوضع عادي وطبيعي، وبنقعد جنب بعض وبنتظاهر في البيوت.
يعني كأفراد أعتقد أول حاجة بتيجي في بالي هي إن إحنا دورنا إن إحنا نكون سفراء للسلام، دورنا إن إحنا نكون بننشر ثقافة سلام وبنحاول ننشر دوت في المحيط بتاعنا، لأن لما بنيجي نتكلم على ثقافة السلام ومسؤولية مين نشر ثقافة السلام، طبعا بيكون في دور كبير قوي على الناس اللي هم عندهم منابر، سواء كانت منابر دينية أو منابر.
Is this the end? Yeah, thanks very much for this presentation. I don't know if it came to the natural or unnatural end, but we'll get some information from the team a while on that. In the meantime, we will move to the second presentation, the second case study, and I will ask you to hold your comments and questions on, I think some of the authors and producers are with us, and we will go straight to the second case, which is presented by Elaine King. Elaine presents the evolution of the Near Media Corp in Ireland and its experiences in training and community broadcasting. Elaine is a community media coordinator for Near TV in Dublin, Ireland. She has done extensive work in the media, in media literacy, resources mobilization, training, and of course, production. She coordinates the European-funded media literacy projects, designing and giving training. Elaine teaches part of a broadcast journalism degree in podcasting and the use of mobile phones for filming. Very interesting, Elaine. Let us all welcome Elaine to make a presentation, which she will do with the help of some slides. Elaine, over to you.
Great. We're just waiting on the slides, maybe.
We can see you.
You can see me. Great. That's a start. Super. If you can share the slides there for me. Great. Can everyone see the slides there?
Yes.
Lovely. And if you can click on there for me, please. So thank you very much for having me. As Embert said, I'm the television coordinator with the Near Media Co-op. If you can click the next slide, please.
We'll get to you.
Super. Okay, so we have a community radio station, and we have a podcast section as well as that, and we have a television section, which is a production house. So we're democratic and not-for-profit, and we're led by volunteers. We established to offer space for voices that were rarely, if ever, heard on mainstream media. And this is particularly around North Dublin and the type of accents for people in North Dublin. If you can click to the next slide, please. So we grew out of pirate radio station, and in areas of North Dublin, they're often seen in negative light in media. And as I said, the accents of people in North Dublin, they're the sort of accent you never hear reading the news. And they're often associated with antisocial behavior and things like that. So that's where we started from, ability for the local people to have their own voice. We've been around for now over 25 years. So we have a committee of management that's elected at an AGM. We have 8 full-time staff, 3 part-time staff, and over 20 staff on employment training schemes. And we have over 120 volunteers working with the Media Co-op. If you can click through again there for me, please. So as I said, we're an alternative to public service and commercial media, and we work with adult education and lifelong learning, community development, and we have an open access policy. So anybody who wants to get involved with us and create their own program is welcome. If you can click through there again, please. The Irish Broadcasting Act in 2009 included community media, and the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland supports us through production funding. So we're funded through a variety of sources, and this is very worthwhile for us because it allows us to remain independent, but it can also mean that we can fall between media, education, and community development. So you can imagine that can have pros and cons in terms of accessing funding locally. If you can click through again there, please, for me. So I wanted just to give a sense of what happens if somebody in the locality would like to come in and have a radio show or get involved in television. So initially we asked them to complete a training course, and this can happen over 6 to 8 weeks, and it's a couple of hours every evening. When they've completed this training, which covers media literacy, media law, storytelling, and production values, we then ask them to shadow a current presenter, and then they can apply for a radio slot. So in many ways, it's as simple as that. It's a very open course, and we try to make sure it's inclusive as possible. As a space with multiple digital supports that we offer volunteers, people often come in through the radio, and then we offer them access to television production, mobile phone filming for TV and online broadcasts, and social media. And as part of our work, we give regular feedback to broadcasters. We offer upskilling, diversity and media literacy training. And in our outreach work, we also target a diverse range of communities for training and broadcasting. So this can be much more targeted project work. If you can click through there for me again, please. Just to give a sense as well of how people think about us. So I just thought I'd pull out a couple of feedbacks we've received from people who've taken part in our work. The first one there from Mary, she said she confesses that I have so much to learn about the hidden influence of radio media on lives. Sorry, my screen has changed for me. I'm just going to pull this up. It's important for me to gain an in-depth understanding and acknowledge the full responsibility bestowed on me. I thought it was a lovely one, and it really highlights how we bring media literacy into the work that we do. And somebody else who had taken part in our podcasting course highlighted how they found it really useful when they did a podcast on Rethinking Democracy. If you can click along there for me again, please. This is just another, I know we'll be sharing these slides with people, but this particular one at the beginning says, last night made me happy. And I think that's an important difference. And again, it just reflects the kind of work that we do and the kind of space that we try to create, that it's open and inclusive for people. Another person who had gotten involved with us, Tracy, she became involved as a woman in local politics. So it's something that we try to promote and encourage within our members. If you can click through again for me there, I'm just coming towards the end. Here are just some examples of some European projects that we've worked on. So again, you can see we do a lot of work around online education, around media literacy, around hate speech. This was a project around respect words, and we link up as much as we can with the European partners so that we can go from our very local space and understand the feeling of being part of a bigger community. If you can click through then just again for me, In terms of aspirations, we hope that we can build more community hubs like ourselves. Community radio exists around Ireland, and community television, there's 2 different groups, but we would love to be able to develop this idea of the hub because each section helps each other. And then finally, if you just click through there's just some photographs of some of the work we do, just to give you a sense of the type of projects. If you can click through to the end, then you can just see. So that's just a flavor of the kind of work that we do. If anyone would like to contact me for more information, I know it's it was a very quick time, but thank you very much for including me.
Thank you very much, Elaine. And I think you have also put your expertise into use in your shot, which has been framed very well with your good depth very good depth of field in the back. And I like Elaine's presentation, like others, including Rania's, they're also on the resource portal for this conference. So thanks very much again, Elaine, on behalf of the participants. And of course, if there are any questions, we will get that to you very soon.
Great, thank you.
Again, we'll move within our WAC working group hour. We'll move to the third case, which is presented by Magali dos Nascimento Cunha, and examines the rise of fundamentalism and the crisis of democracy, as well as the threats to human rights in Latin America. It is a case where fundamentalists and political conservatives have wrested the concept of morality to make it a political tool. Magali is a university professor, a researcher on the Brazil Truth Commission, and a member of the WCC Commission on Faith and Order. We now invite you to view the video presentation by Magali Cunha. To you, technical team.
Hello, I'm Magali Cunha from Brazil. I'm going to share with you in the next minutes the results of a research in which I was involved. I coordinated this research. I'm going to share my screen that it will be easier to be on time and systematize what was this research called Fundamentalisms, the Crisis of Democracy and the Threat to Human Rights in South America, Trends and Challenges for Action. It was held by a Ecumenical Forum of South America, of ACT Alliance in Latin America, and it was supported by ACT Church of Sweden and Christian Aid. I will present you some of the findings based on the understanding that the 21st century represents an advance of fundamentalisms, not only in Latin America, but all over the world. It's a new stage of fundamentalism that was born in the United States in 1910s, transformed during the 20th century with a political dimension. The climax was the creation of moral majority in the United States, the new right in politics, but with dimensions in all over the world. Fundamentalism becomes a social phenomenon that goes beyond the religious dimension and acquires a more diversified profile and assumes a political, economical, environmental, and cultural character. Our first finding is related to the idea that fundamentalisms are a religious political phenomenon in Latin America. We understand it as a continent of religion, hegemony of Roman Catholic Christianity, but also plural Protestant force, especially in the last 3 decades with Pentecostalism, and the important, however, demonized expressions of indigenous and Afro descendants. Latin America is also a continent of colonialism. It's very important, in which created military dictatorships based on the social political structure of colonialism. Land ownership, racism, authoritarian populism, patronage, and corruption. So our first finding was an attempt at the definition of fundamentalisms in plural, a worldview, an interpretation of reality with a religious matrix combined with political actions resulting from it, which weaken democratic processes and human rights, especially those related to sexual, reproductive rights and those of the traditional communities' politics of valorization of the plurality. Fundamentalisms are not homogeneous. They are based on the idea of oppositionism. And so because of that, we found our second finding, fundamentalist trends in the region. We found 7 characteristics, 7 trends. The backlash on sexual and reproductive rights, the pro-family discourse as an economic political project, moral panic and permanent clash with enemies, spread of disinformation and fake news, threat to traditional communities, indigenous and Afro-descendants, coordinated actions, a kind of union of objectives, appropriation of issues of the secular state and religious freedom, and new fundamentalist movements from the United States operating in South America. And the third finding are the possible strategies for response, a necessary self-criticism of ecumenical movement and of groups who work with human rights, strengthening institutional actions and regional alliances, adequately understands of the role of religion and its relationship with society, retake critical thinking formation, address the conservative fields and fundamentalisms. Pentecostal evangelicals are not the culprits, we have to understand it, understand more deeply the complexity on social demands, consider emotions in the organization of social life, review the discourse of defense of secular state as a position to fundamentalisms, as fundamentalist groups usage, attention to youth, learn with indigenous and Afro-descendant communities, and reformulate communication processes that are very important in that. Thank you for your attention, and I invite you to read what is available about our research in our website of ACT Alliance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and let us thank Magali for her presentation. Very thorough research condensed into a very tight few-minute presentation. We move right away to our fourth case study, and this will be presented by Suman Basnet. Suman addresses the phenomenon of shrinking community radio spaces and some of the regulatory and operational challenges that are being faced by these community radio operators. Suman is a 30-year veteran multimedia content producer and has been working with AMAC for about 2 decades. He also worked with community broadcasters and has been very much involved in the use of community radio for disaster risk reduction. He's attended many conferences and made several presentations. He's authored several communication strategies for various entities and community organizations. And he's also involved in looking at media legislation with a focus on Asia Pacific region. Let us welcome Suman for his presentation. I think Suman will go live. Suman, over to you. Can you unmute? Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much, Ambert, for the generous presentation. It's such an enlightening experience to be part of this symposium. Thank you for having me. Since we don't have a lot of time, I'll come to my point right away. And I'm here to express my view on the fact that democratic public space for communication is actually shrinking in community radios. This is especially a huge contradiction because the foundation of community broadcasting lies on the principles of unhindered and unlimited public space for communication. There are many interlinked reasons for this contradiction. I'll mention just a few in view of the time limitation. The first point, please, in the same slide. Thank you. Firstly, a clear distinction is lacking between policies and regulations. What we have in most of the Asia-Pacific region in the name of community radio policies are actually just regulations. Documents about community broadcasting in Bangladesh, Nepal, India, Indonesia, Thailand, Myanmar, the Philippines, and many other countries of the region mainly state what community radios cannot do. They basically place limits on everything, from transmission powers to advertisements to content and so on and so forth. What should be included in policies are the guarantees for a space for marginalized communities, share in the public funds, independent regulatory mechanisms, frequency reservations, absence of multiple regulatory control. None of these are there. The number of local radios across the Asia-Pacific region is large, mainly because civil societies have successfully negotiated with governments the right to broadcast. However, the sector has submitted itself to a hugely unequal and unfair partnership over community broadcasting rights by agreeing to a very narrow definition of community broadcasting. For example, it is accepted with very little or almost no challenge the government version of community broadcasting, which limits the sector to the FM band only. The reality is that community radios can exist wherever a community is. Communities are indeed found in FM, but they're also found on AM or medium waves, satellite radio, podcasting, narrowcasting, cablecasting, and so on. It has been famously said that community radio is 90% community and 10% radio. However, governments would like us to believe that it is all about radio, and that too just about FM. The issue of influential political and commercial interests taking over community spaces is often discussed across different platforms. What is less discussed is the NGOization of community media spaces. What the writer-activist Arundhati Roy has called the NGOization of resistance aptly describes the current situation of community broadcasting. In simple terms, NGOization refers to professionalization, bureaucratization, and institutionalization of movements. Large and influential NGOs are found to be owning and operating community radios in many countries of the Asia-Pacific region. The fact that regulations governing community radios in many countries of the Asia-Pacific region insist on providing broadcasting licenses only to existing NGOs and similar organizations has greatly aggravated this situation. NGOs and their development partners are found to be using community broadcasting that suits their interest and or in support of ideas that reinforce what they consider to be good for local communities. And the last slide, please. To conclude, I would like to state that a strategic and a dedicated movement to reclaim democratic public spaces for communication needs to be launched. Firstly, donors need to invest on strengthening policy advocacy. Such initiatives should mainly include organizing grassroots level activities, including developing capacity of broadcasters for policy advocacy and media literacy. It should also include networking across countries for mutual learning and solidarity, for organizing strategic multi-stakeholder meetings and so on. Investments have to be made to strike partnerships across social and political movements, especially involving the minorities and the marginalized. Next, governments should be encouraged to design cultural policies that promote the production of cultural, educational, and scientific content and the development of local cultural institutions suited to the linguistic and cultural context of community members. And lastly, the community broadcasting sector needs to develop a robust self-governing mechanism by working on internal codes of ethics covering all aspects of community broadcasting. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Suman. Been very obedient with our time. And we want to say extreme thanks to that, because in the interest of time, we probably just will move on. These were very excellent case studies, which raise issues related to the problems of use of public spaces and public media, the potentials which were raised by Elaine, especially in training, and also some of the challenges which Suman raised as well in terms of the use of community media and so forth. We will now go straight to our some solutions recommendations which the working group. We did know that in our work it was very extensive and 1 hour would have been very tight, but it also makes my job easier as the broadcaster with very little dead air to talk. So I will now like to invite the technical team to put up the slide of our recommendations and solutions, which I will quickly go through. It's on the screen for you to see as well. But just to quickly run through it, we looked at some of the thematic areas related to public space and some of the solutions and recommendations. And we broke it down into 4. The first was the theoretical and ethical, a lot of the challenges that Dennis posed to us, and then some of the recommendations. I will not read all of them, but just sort of speak to them. The first one on the ethical and theoretical, for us to address the issues to ensure justice, equity, equality, as well as the use of content and the proper articulation of languages and cultures in all channels and all platforms and devices. Affordability as well, both from a practical as well as a conceptual point of view, make sure that media is affordable to all. We need to prioritize these spaces for voices who have traditionally been excluded. On the political, they need to create civil and faith-based communities of resistance to the current neoliberal consumerist ideology, again, which Dennis very ably referred to in his presentation. To build widespread coalitions to ensure there's transparency, participation, and collaboration, and expand public spaces. We also focused on building, under the heading education, building awareness of the complex nature of the digital public space, both the positive and negative issues. There has to be the development of skills in negotiation, skills in listening, and also to address issues of contra opinions, as has been highlighted by the case studies dealing with fundamentalism in the media. And at the sort of technology level is to have the devices and the access that is affordable, that is of a particular quality that makes the use practical and effective, both as well as in terms of the software as well as the hardware. The system has to be interoperable, again, relating to platforms and hardware. And finally, support and encouragement for open source, Creative Commons, and culturally appropriate shared ownership of information and knowledge. This is really a kind of point to highlight the challenges that proprietary software and proprietary technology raise in terms of giving access to people who are less able to afford, and to address the issues of the elites dominating these public spaces. In the last couple of minutes, if there are any burning questions, you will have the opportunity to discuss in your various groups. But if there are any burning questions, I'll probably give a minute or half a minute if someone has a burning question on a case study. And the dead air includes your time, so if you're not speaking, I will continue to speak. Okay, so we will be moving into our breakout groups after a short break. The short break will commence precisely at 3 o'clock. It is really at 9 o'clock my time, at 3 o'clock German time. We advise you to keep your Zoom link on, and you just come back in 15 minutes. We have put a series of questions for consideration of the working groups, and the questions to guide your discussions are as follows. How can excluded voices be strengthened or included within the digital space? What actions are needed to guarantee citizens the right to own and control their data, information, and knowledge, free from commercial, state, or other co-option? What steps will contribute to uphold and validate social justice, communication rights, the common good within digital spaces? The notes, you can send your notes after the working group sessions to the address which is in the chat. The questions are also in the chat. In fact, the questions and the instructions. And we're asking all groups to choose a facilitator to ensure that your discussions are smooth and effective. Normally this takes some time, so we hope that you could dispense with that process as quickly as possible. So we wish you a very fruitful discussion, and we will now go to a break and see you back in 15 minutes. Thank you very much for being with us for the first hour this afternoon session. Over to you, technical team. We welcome you back to our final leg of our afternoon session. And again, I want to thank everyone for being so attentive and very much engaged in the discussions on the very sort of key topics we have so far. Before I start, I just want to just share with you, there's a poem by a famous Guyanese poet called Martin Carter, which speaks a lot to some of the issues happening around us today, which we don't understand. I'm sure some of you are familiar with it. It's called "This is a Dark Time, My Love." And I'll just read the first stanza. It goes like this. This is a dark time, my love. All around the land, brown beetles crawl about. The shining sun is hidden in the sky. Red flowers bend their heads in awful sorrow. This is a dark time, my love. It's a season of oppression, dark metal and tears. It is a festival of guns, carnival of misery. Everywhere the faces of men are strained and anxious. Some of what COVID has done to the world today. And I'm sure it takes some time to reflect on what's happening around us. And hopefully that out of these sessions, we come up with some answers for the world, which is crying for answers at this time. We now go to a new set of case studies, which speak to some of the practical application of some of the issues that we have been discussing. We have 3 studies which we are to share with the group today. And one is the ALAI from Latin America, Ecuador. The second one is IdeoSync out of India. And the third is Barrier Project out of Brazil. And I would now like to invite the team to produce the first. I have them in this order, but I also have a brief introduction by Vinu, who is doing the case study on IdeoSync. And IdeoSync is a non-profit agency based in New Delhi, which focuses on communication for social change. Vinu is a development communication specialist, film producer, and trainer. Vinu, I hope I got your name pronounced correctly. You can give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down, if that's, as the case may be.
Yes, that's good. Thank you, Amber.
Okay. So we'll present we have the 3 case studies. I would rely on the team to present them in the order that they have them queued. So I'll just invite the group to welcome the presenter of the first case study. Over to you, technical team.
Hello.
Sally.
Greetings from Ecuador. I'm Sally Birch of the Latin American Information Agency, ALAI. The rapid transition towards digitalized societies that has accelerated with the pandemic offers us multiple solutions for work, education, entertainment, even our social life and family contacts. But it has also brought to light the digital divide and exacerbated social exclusion for those without sufficient access. Those of us who do have access have seen our dependency on the big tech corporations increase substantially over this past year, as has the wealth and power of these companies. Since the internet is clearly a great asset and makes our lives easier, we tend to dismiss the more ominous aspects of this new power structure, or simply feel powerless to address them. Yet no struggle for social justice can afford to overlook the implications it's having for democracy, economic power concentration, basic rights such as privacy and decent working conditions, among many others. With this concern, the Internet Ciudadana, or People's Internet Initiative, was launched in Latin America 4 years ago to further explore and debate around these phenomena. Over this past year, it has been coordinating a process of online exchange sessions entitled Utopias or Dystopias, the Peoples of Latin America and the Caribbean Confronting the Digital Era, which was aimed at gaining a greater understanding of how digitalization is impacting multiple aspects of our lives and societies, and the particular challenges we face under the present corporate dominant model of digitalization. For these exchanges, a series of proposals arose relating to both public policy and alternative technologies in view of contributing to digital justice, more democratic control of the technology, and mitigating its negative impacts. For several months, thematic working groups focused on 5 key areas: work, education, agriculture and rural life, media and communication, and collective digital rights. In each case, producing a diagnostic of the situation, analysis of the causes and impacts, and then a series of proposals. The results were then shared with the other thematic groups in order to produce a common understanding and joint proposals. Some examples of the key findings include these. In education, with schools closed due to the pandemic, the forced transition to virtuality revealed the existing educational disparities and the digital divide in the region. Moreover, the recourse to commercial education platforms such as Microsoft Education or Google Classroom are contributing to new forms of privatization of education. In agriculture, we found that digital technologies mainly benefit big agribusiness concerns and the financialization of land, but contribute little to peasant farming. This is further exacerbated by the tendency for rural areas to be isolated from basic services, including connectivity. The communication and media group stressed that the monopolistic digital platforms have become instruments of manipulation, surveillance, and control. They call on civic groups to appropriate the technological tools so as to produce and dispute ideas in the digital realm. With respect to work, capitalism in crisis is seeking to reinvent itself through the digital realm and maximize its profits. The increase in teleworking brought about by the pandemic tends to mean increased exploitation, while platform workers face a return to the precarious conditions of the past, with few or no labor rights. And with respect to collective digital rights, it was noted how the sanitary crisis has introduced new forms of surveillance and control, which the population largely feels obliged to accept. And also how our data, which has become the basic input for wealth generation in the digital economy, is being seized and exploited by big tech, cost-free and largely unregulated. Among the proposals emerging from the process, we emphasize that the internet should be considered an essential public service and regulated as such. But we also underline that universal access should not mean universal exploitation of our data. Rather, our data should be declared by law to belong to the individual or community that generates it. And while intimate personal data should be protected from abuse and commodification, communities should have the power to determine who uses their collective data and to what end. Nor should we be obliged to submit to corporate profiteering and control over the platforms we use to intercommunicate, which should either be regulated as public services or be run on a community basis. This points to the need to strengthen good practices in the use of autonomous technology, including free and open software, distributed platforms as alternatives to centralized ones, and the need for training to build critical digital literacy. It also calls for developing greater technological sovereignty at a community, national, and regional level. So these are some of the cross-cutting proposals we've developed. Meanwhile, many other proposals address more specific aspects in each thematic area. For example, a regulation of workers' rights in new labor relations, in particular teleworking and platform work, or research in digital technologies that can contribute to food sovereignty. However, for these ideas to advance, the first step is to open a much broader public debate, and more specifically, to raise awareness within organized sectors about the serious implications of this new reality and the importance of including these issues in their respective action agendas. To that end, with support of WAC, we've produced a series of dissemination materials in different formats, text, audio, video, infographics, etc., and we're initiating a campaign to raise awareness on these issues in the Latin American region in the coming weeks. This campaign will be directed particularly to people's organizations with the aim of mobilizing greater support for the proposals and tracing concrete lines of action. We thus hope to contribute to building a critical mass willing to move forwards with these proposals, both at the level of public policy and regulation, as well as building alternatives. The initiative has raised widespread interest in the region. A series of related seminars held in 2020 attracted some 2,000 to 3,000 visitors, several of whom have joined the process. So, what lessons have we learned from this experience? Firstly, we've understood that many of the negative aspects of our newly digitalized societies, such as mass surveillance and manipulation through social media, are not simply accidents to be corrected, but a part of the essence of the business model being developed for the digital economy. And that to address these issues, we need to find ways to address and change that model. Furthermore, what we're seeing now is the beginning of a much more ambitious plan that, for example, the World Economic Forum has named as the Great Reset, designed to submit our societies to the rule of artificial intelligence controlled by corporate interests. Also, most of the governments in our region have practically abandoned goals of technological sovereignty, and even legislation following, for example, the European models for data protection and control of monopolies is largely lacking here. But also, we've understood that there's a huge gap between this understanding of the global context, this global reality, and the immediate situation of the majority of people in our region who simply see their urgent need for basic access or better connectivity and equipment for their educational or work requirements, or to access information and be able to communicate. So in conclusion, we've identified the need to undertake a serious offensive to raise awareness and mobilize people so that they can first claim their rights to what should be a basic service, but also feel empowered to understand the underlying issues, so as to be able to make choices of what technology to use and how, and start to take collective action towards an internet controlled by the people for the people. We know this will be a long struggle, and there are no doubt more urgent ones such as the climate, health, poverty. But it will be one of the central struggles of this century because it conditions the terrain in which increasingly these other struggles and the dispute of ideas and narratives are taking place. Thank you.
In India, women have far less access to mobiles and internet as compared to men. The National Family Health Survey 2020, that covered 17 states of India and 5 union territories, showed that only 42% of women have ever used the internet. In a recent Delhi government economic survey, as many as 80% households did not have a computer or a laptop, and of the 20% who did, only 80% had internet. This lack of access to smartphones and internet creates barriers to growth and development on many different fronts. As was revealed during the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdowns, only those with access to the internet and smartphones were able to carry on their livelihoods and even education. In a digital and connected world, our everyday lives are lived online. Access to knowledge and information, access to education, to banking, health, new skills, and even basic entitlements are linked to online access. In this scenario, this kind of digital gender gap threatens to roll back critical gains made over decades. My name is Venu Arora, and I co-founded IdeoSync Media Combine, a communication for social change organization that has, over the last 20 years, worked on media development, in particular around strengthening community radio in India and South Asia, communication rights, in particular for marginalized youth, including migrants, and digital media and information literacy, in particular for women and girls. We undertake trainings, produce innovative and feminist content, and do communication and media research. IdeoSync Media combines Freedom, Digital and Media Literacy Pathshala, our community schools for digital and media literacy, run out of local community spaces in urban slums. The initiative began in 2017 and involved community members, and in particular women and girls from migrant and marginalized minority communities. Our work revealed that girls' access to smartphones and computers in households that do own these devices is far less than boys. And this is not just because of financial constraints where families are unable to afford multiple digital devices, but is exacerbated due to continued patriarchy and gender discrimination. Mobile phones and an internet recharge is a passage to the world. This is denied to women and girls with a view to keeping them safe, controlling their mobility and their sexuality, and indeed, in many cases, controlling their agency and voice. Our research also shows that women and girls' experiences online continue to be framed by trolling and abuse, resulting in many resorting to self-censorship or withdrawal from the digital space, especially from social media. Further, there continues to be a lack of digital literacy and education programs. The high school curriculum in India does not include a comprehensive digital and media literacy module, and while boys pick up these skills as they have freer access to digital devices and more social mobility, the same is not true of women and girls. This makes young girls and women hesitant and tentative when provided access to the internet and to smartphones. It requires training programs to be designed to help trainees overcome these initial hesitation. In the long term, this lack of access may result in an absence of women contributors to the development of technologies, in particular digital and online technologies. This lack of participation of diverse economic backgrounds will result in an online world which will be discriminatory and marginalizing towards them and towards others. And media literacy, therefore, must become a core part of education curricula, and the digital space needs to be viewed through a feminist lens. Our digital media and information literacy program has been designed after nearly a year's research and needs assessment with the women and girls in urban slums. The program is designed to be responsive to their learning needs as well as to their online skills and tactics the ones that they wish to hone. At the Pathshala, women and girls come together once a week for a 16-week training program. They learn about smartphones and mobile apps, privacy settings, online banking, online payment application, travel bookings, searching online for information including news, navigating social media, and also the curriculum includes learning to record and edit audio, video and photo stories. At the end of this training program, many trainees continue their engagement with the program as Freedom Fellows and community reporters. The Pathshala has a bag full of mobiles. Girls over 15 are welcome to join the Pathshala, and the Pathshala is also open to women and boys. The Freedom Pathshala hosts a feminist library with books curated to help fellows make sense of the world from a gender equality lens. The fellows manage a WhatsApp radio which has over 500 subscribers from local communities. The media that the trainees and Freedom Fellows create is also uploaded on a podcast. Fellows are producing content under podcast series titled Women Who Talk Too Much, Love is Part of Life, and Free to Speak, apart from local information pieces. Once a month, a Munadi Wali rickshaw or a public announcement cart travels the bylanes of the community with a large loudspeaker, stopping at strategic locations for a community audio listening chopal or gathering. As evening falls, the trainees put up a white sheet on the community wall and screen short films that they have made, and other films curated to foster a discussion on gender equality and communication and media rights. Once every 3 months, the program holds a community event to enable the local community to engage with freedom reporters and for the reporters to update the community along with local elected representatives about critical issues impacting the community. The Freedom Program has trained over 300 young women, of which 15 have emerged as community leaders and hyper-local reporters who are able to amplify their voices and those of other members in their community. They are able to negotiate use of mobiles with their families, and many are able to advocate for more girls and women to participate in the program. During the pandemic lockdowns, several fellows put together a digital help desk to assist their communities to access their entitlements and food rations that were made available by the local government through online registration. The help desk also assisted in to help the digitally non-literate community members log into the mobile application through which the Indian government was registering citizens for COVID vaccine. They also documented the hardships and challenges faced by their community members, in particular girls and women. The COVID Special Freedom Community podcast highlighted increase in domestic violence, alcoholism, lack of privacy, and other such critical issues and amplified these concerns to the larger community. We are thankful to WAC for being the first to support this program and for continuing to support us. Since then, the Freedom Digital and Media Literacy Program has received additional funds from other donors, and we look forward to expanding and strengthening the work in the years to come.
Hello, I'm Magali Cunha. I'm speaking from Brazil, from Rio de Janeiro. I'm going to share with you a project in which I'm involved in since 2019. With a group of journalists and researchers on communication who study religion, communication and religion, and Christian journalists, we worked together on a research of the University of Rio de Janeiro, a research on the circulation of disinformation among religious groups through WhatsApp. With the conclusions of this research, especially with the understanding that Christians are a target for the dissemination of disinformation with influence in several areas of Brazilian life, we decided to do something. And we created this project, a collective, Berea Collective, Information and Fact Checking. And I'm going to share how we have operated since 2019. I'm going to share my screen to show some slides that will help me to keep on the time that I have to share with you. So this is a picture of our website created in 2019. We are a group of volunteers. We gathered to create the collective in 2019, and we had the support, and we have until today, the support of an ecumenical organization called Paz e Esperança Brasil, Peace and Online. And we have worked on volunteer basis with a group of people. And this is our website, and we are in social media as Coletivo Berea. Berea is a name chosen from the Bible to create an identification between our project and the public. That is, the aim is to get to the public that is religious, especially Christians. And we understood that this Berea act that is mentioned in Acts chapter 17 would be a reference because it's a group of Jews who received the message of the gospel through Paul the Apostle, but they went to the Jewish scriptures to check if Paul the Apostle was saying something that was true and right. So Berea is a symbol for us of checking. And who we are journalists, we are academic researchers on communication and religion, and trainees, students of communication, professionals of other areas interested on fact-checking. We gathered these people, and we are 23 now from different regions of Brazil. Almost all of us are volunteers. We give at least 4 hours of dedication per week, and we have one person responsible for putting what we produce, the stories we produce, the checking we produce in our website. So Peace and Hope Brazil offers a scholarship for this person to act. And so this is the only person who has financial support to do the work. All the other 22 are volunteer. We are 100% online in working since 2019, even before pandemic, COVID-19, we worked together through online work, gathering people from all over Brazil. We have partnerships and institutional support. We have support from WOC Latin America, of the Latin American Caribbean Agency, Ecumenical Agency, ILLC, of SIGNIS, the Catholic Organization of Communication, Intercom, that is a society on interdisciplinary studies on communication from Brazil, and Peace and Hope Brazil that I mentioned. And we work with partnerships, doing things together, and some groups that disseminate what we usually do. The Catholic Radio Network, Protestant Coalition for Rights, the Lab on Anthropology and Religion of the University of Campinas, a city of São Paulo state, Coronavirus in Check, a project of the University in Pernambuco, in northeast of Brazil, and Comprova project that is an agency of fact-checking Brazil. Our actions. First, we work on fact-checking, our main work, to check information published in religious media and Brazilian social media that address content about religions and their leadership in Brazil and abroad. Opinions or analytical material are not checked, only informative materials, news. We do a round on gospel news websites and social media profiles of religious leaders to see what they publish and see material that is potential check material. We produce also work on follow-up of statements and statements by politicians and Christian authorities of national expression, leaders of the religious branch, the legislative branch, executive branch, and judiciary branch authorities. We also check what is broadcasted by news media on those national authorities and national leaders, and also in social media or exposed in parliament. We check these statements to see what must be evaluated by our team. Besides the fact-checking work, we also work on reflection and training. We have a session on our website that we call Areopagus, that is a complement to the work by offering texts and reflections on the theme of the importance of information and care for it, as well as other topics related to Christian life, spirituality, religion, and politics. Texts will be published once a week or more, exceptionally, as required by the current situation. But we also offer to different groups, to churches, to ecumenical groups, and also to academic groups, lectures and short courses on the issue of disinformation related to religious spaces. We understand that we have potential material for checking. Material of religious nature originating from monitored media spaces, as I already mentioned, non-religious material disseminated in monitored media spaces that are religious, so not only religious content, but content that are non-religious, but they are disseminated in religious spaces. We also check material that we consider material of relevance, that has interference in valuing the image of public figures, groups, institutions, organizations, associations, social movements, material that has interference in social, political, economic, and cultural agendas, and interference in electoral processes. Berea avoids reverberating and therefore amplifying banal content, meaningless content, irrelevant content, even if it represents disinformation. We also consider about relevance that with regard to publications on social media that are not altered or reproduced by the characters listed for monitoring, the wide reach should be observed and only content viralized on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, or whatever known repercussion on WhatsApp. Only things that are viralized. We don't want to amplify things that are not very well known. Berea also avoids reverberating low-rated content. And so we check reach on Facebook and Instagram before we publish something. And we have an app called Crown Tangle that we consult to check that. And we have a method. First, we work on suspicion. What we call suspicion. We do these rounds on media spaces, gospel websites, and leadership spaces in social media and their websites also. And we work on suspicions about absolute statements, unusual cases, lack of relevant data for information on a theme, verbal terror or moral panic on themes related to politics, religious freedom, gender, sexual morality. And we work also on suggested content by the public through our social media and through our WhatsApp number that we published. The public is called for us to work on suspicion on what this public access, and they are free to suggest content for our fact-checking. And we also work in our method with a WhatsApp group of our team. I mentioned that we work on online basis, and so we meet through our WhatsApp group for our agenda setting, for suggestions of material to be checked, on the evaluation of situation of Brazil in several areas. We exchange information through this WhatsApp group, and we have also online meetings every 2 months. After we check, we publish what we check, our research, our evaluation of material that is checked, with some evaluation on what is true, what is not precise, what is fake, what is inconclusive, and what is false. And so we have some classification of the content through these elements that we present as our evaluation. In 2021, we have a potential agenda, potential themes that we are considering in our monitoring of these spaces in the internet. COVID-19 is a theme, a strong theme: false healing, previous treatment, vaccines, data on contaminated and dead people, role of China. The second theme is sexuality, women and LGBTIQA rights, abortion, pedophilia, racism and xenophobia, several disinformation elements that circulate on that, also religious persecution, false Christophobia, Islamophobia, communists versus Christians, and the political scenery in Brazil. So with that, I finish my presentation, and I will be available to any contacts to know more about what we are doing through the REA project. I invite you to visit our website. It's in Portuguese, but you can visit there and have an idea of what we are doing. That is very different, because we are the only agency or project that work with fact-checking all religious content. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Magali. And I also want to thank Sally and Vinu for their presentations, and of course, the teams who they work with to make these things well happen. They are with us live, and I'm sure you would want the benefit of them to answer some questions on these presentations. They may want to sort of make some contextual comments as well, if necessary, after the videos, in light of the discussions from earlier today and earlier this afternoon. But before I invite them, let me just send out 3 reminders. One is that there is a meet and greet for digital justice, what we call in the Caribbean. There's a little lime after the session which starts at 7 p.m. Berlin time. It's next hour and a half after we complete our session, where we are inviting the people who have joined this meet and greet to be a bit more creative, a bit more informal in the way that we want to recommend some of the solutions. I've always thought that the use of the creative arts is very critical in addressing some of these issues of digital justice, the same way we use the creative arts to look at issues related to climate change. The second reminder is for the regional review sessions, which again are held afterwards in the different times for the different regions of the world, and just time for the Atlantic region. Well, across the Atlantic, it's really the discussion group for the Americas, which starts at 3:30 New York time. And the third reminder, of course, is for you to join, to make some time tomorrow to join tomorrow's sessions, which of course have another interesting list of speakers and respondents. So we have some time for us to discuss. You may want to pull up some things that you have had bothering you from morning or from early afternoon, but more particularly, we want to respond to the most recent presentations from Vinu, Sally, and Magali. So, any questions or comments? While you're thinking, I will want to invite Vinu just to sort of, if you want to make some contextual comments on the video.
No, I thank you so much, Embert. I think there's so much food for thought in all that we've been discussing since morning. I've been part of the earlier group work as well. And I think one of the things that we all recognize is that it's a layered and complex situation we are faced with. On the one hand, we need more and more people whose voices are currently excluded to have access. And on the other hand, we need to have greater accountability for the large corporations and to ensure that there is justice and there is equality, meaningful equality. So I think we are dealing with complex issues, and at my end, we are constantly trying to improve the media literacy curriculum that we are working with when we are working with women and girls, and simultaneously we are also engaging in discussions with young people who have greater access and I would say are on the other end of the digital spectrum, where they are English speaking, they have access to technologies, to ask them to explore where this whole data colonization is in many ways, leading us towards possibly a bigger marginalization than we have ever seen before. So I think I'll just stop with that, because we are engaging with this debate and these questions on a daily basis.
Thank you, Venu. Sure, others may have comments or questions. Just unmute and speak. While we waiting, I want to introduce Magali with a question for her. The question that has been posed through our chat is, what is the reaction by religious leaders and communities to your fact-checking their work?
Oh, thank you, Ambert. Thank you for the question. And well, until now, we are almost on the second year completed of our work. Until now, we haven't had any big bad reaction. I mean, I'm beginning with the bad thing, because since the beginning, we were prepared for bad reactions to even trying to stop what you're doing. But no, we have had very, very good supportive reaction. Of course, some criticism through our presence in social media, some messages that we receive questioning what authority we have to do that. But as we have a method, as we are based on what is the fact-checking work, we studied a lot before we began our project, do what fact-checking projects and agencies are doing all over the world. And now we are working on our recognition through IFCN that gives recognition to those who work on fact-checking. And we are working to have this accreditation to give any more value to what we do. So the reaction has been very good in public. People who connect to us to offer themes to be checked, people who send materials that circulate in church group, WhatsApp groups or church groups in social media. So we evaluate as a very good reception of what we have been doing. Thank you.
Thank you. I see we have Michael, your hand is up. Could you ask your question, please? See your hand up, yeah? Yeah, go ahead. Could you unmute?
Okay, sorry, my micro was switched off. Okay, thank you so much, Magali. It was very interesting to hear you. It's an amazing work you are doing. My questions is, how react the other journalists to your work? Do they use your fact-checking in their own publication? Do they correct when they've written something wrong?
We have had very interesting reaction from journalists of alternative media, or as we call, not the major media of the mainstream media, but alternative media, independent agencies that have connected to us and even used our materials, sharing some of the things we are doing. Mainstream media have not reacted because actually we haven't checked what they have been doing. The major work we do is checking religious journalism. The journalism made by religious groups, especially Christian groups and churches, and especially independent religious media. These groups are sometimes very angry at what we are doing because, of course, we are saying they are lying, they are misleading, they are deceiving, and some of them sometimes write to us, but they don't have empirical, let's say like that, arguments to say that what we do is wrong. Actually, we are correcting what they are doing. They are lying. So we are showing very well with very strong material that show that they are lying. So these are some reactions, but we have had very good reception from and by mainstream media and alternative media.
Thank you very much. I hope that is a fair response to the question. Hand is still up.
Ask another one?
Yes, go ahead. I see your hand still up. Go ahead.
Well, what are the topics where you find mistakes?
Especially those who are related to what we call moral panic. The topics that touch some areas of sexual morality, especially, like feminists are working to dominate and to create a kind of feminist dictatorship in Brazil, and we have to stop these people. Also, LGBTQIA movements that are working to influence children and make people in schools, children in schools, all gays, and especially these issues on sexual morality. They are very strong. They have been used in electoral campaigns, especially under Jair Bolsonaro, our president in Brazil. This are strongly used. Also, in times of COVID, since last year, because of COVID-19, this issue on communism in China, they are conservative groups in churches are using the idea that there is a communist strategy to dominate the world through vaccines and things like that. This is very strong. And a very new issue is an issue on liberty and freedom of religion. Freedom of religion. That churches and religious groups they have to have freedom to express themselves, even to condemn other religions, other groups who work in politics, and they have the support from groups from the United States, for example, who work in the same direction, and other groups in Latin America who are working the same direction. So these are the main talks: sexual morality, COVID-19 and issues related to health, and liberty and freedom of religion.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? Sally, I haven't forgotten you. I'll be coming to you shortly. But while Magali was hot on the button, we're gonna see if there are any more questions for her. There is a question again to Magali. The work you describe is important, but as you say, it's long-term. Where do you see the strongest signs of progress? And what do you think would help make an even stronger impact?
We believe that we are opening the way for many other groups to do the work on that direction, to work with good information that is just and fair in religious spaces. We hope that we open spaces also. We work especially with Christians, but to open spaces for other religions to work, and especially the work on education and formation for good information, and to allow people to learn. I think we have a strong need, and we are opening a way for that too. And people are being more aware of that, of the need to understand what disinformation. I'm not talking about misinformation. I'm talking about disinformation. The information that is a project of non-information of society. So people are more aware of the evil that it represents and the way that we have to form and educate people for themselves to work on suspicion or what has to be checked by people themselves.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gali. Probably I will introduce Sally now, and Sally, perhaps you could come in, make a few comments, and maybe just focus as well on the issue of impact of your work. Sally?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Does it sound good?
Very well.
Yes, I think just to add to the things I was talking about, I think, and to the discussion of the previous session, one of the areas where it's hardest to intervene in policy issues to defend digital justice and digital rights issues is precisely the digital realm. And I think it's one of the hardest for several reasons. One, it's something that's so imbricated in people's daily lives and so useful, often attractive, that we tend to see the power structures of the big corporations that we use on a daily basis as something positive rather than negative. Secondly, it's moving so fast that it's very hard to know how and where to intervene. Thirdly, the governance, the governance of digital issues is largely transnational. There's a limited extent to which governments can intervene on an individual basis. The corporate presence has been there in these transnational spaces for from the outset of the information society on this coast. And it's an area that's hard to understand if you don't understand the technology, all this technological jargon and so on, the invisibility of artificial intelligence. So it's a very complex area on which to try to mobilize people to take a position to intervene because they don't know how. You feel impotent in the face of this technology. But I think there are some areas where we can start, and this is what we're working on in Latin America, is for people to become aware that, one, they do have a power because these corporations depend absolutely on us using their technology. So how far we use them and don't use them affects them directly. And we saw that with the case of WhatsApp this year when they announced that they were going to sell people's data, and immediately there was a huge transition to Telegram, which isn't necessarily better, but at least it was a warning to WhatsApp, to Facebook, because WhatsApp is Facebook, of what they can and can't do. But I think we can work around some key ideas. For example, one of the things we're going to work on in a campaign in Latin America is our data belong to us. Yeah, and that's something people can identify with very easily. And it's also a key issue, although it's difficult to know how to own our data. It's a good starting point because it goes to the heart of the digital economy. That who owns the data is at the center. And it's something that's not regulated, and that therefore the big companies assume that because they collect it, it's theirs. So I think that's sort of an area where we want to start raising a broader campaign, starting with mainly the social movements that are already organized around different issues in the fields I was talking about and others. and putting forward some key ideas. One is a data belong to us, and another is the right to have access to technology, because now it's fundamental to be able to work, to be able to have education. But that shouldn't mean that just because we have access, therefore we're giving everything away for free to these big corporations.
Thank you very much, Sally. And perhaps I could bring in Venu to perhaps speak also about respond to the same question about impact of your work as well. Venu?
Yeah, thank you, Embert. So one of the things that is wonderful when we do our media literacy work with women and girls who are sometimes independently using smartphones for the first time is how after a few months of conversation and discussions that they are able to parse this understanding of exactly what Sally was talking about, is to want ownership over their data and to want to have the right to be forgotten, and some of those issues. And so I think increasingly we are beginning to feel the need to invest in critical digital and media literacy. So not just fact checking and fake news, which is important, but to understand the role that media plays in a democracy, to understand the role, the importance of having a voice and have that voice heard. And in some of those ideas that we work with the girls, it's been hard to translate. So one of the things is that a lot of these ideas are written up and discussed in English. And when we want to translate them in other languages, we struggle because there are no words for much of this. So that's the other work that we are trying to do, is to be able to create a language which is local and can be understood in the local dialect, because there's nuance that we can build into the English language when we're talking about digital rights and digital justice. But how do we translate that into Hindi, for example, or other local regional languages? And that requires work and conversation to find the words that will express the same idea. So that's the other thing that we are learning to do, and we think that it's important to also build global campaigns, because the world speaks so many different languages, and we must have these conversations in those languages and not just in English.
Thank you very much, Venu. Yes, I think all of these comments speak to the issue of inclusion, including the excluded, which is what I think we're all about in trying to optimize the digital public spaces for development. Who are we programming for? The extent to which our own values are translated or transmitted in our messages. And because in a lot of cases, agencies which work with communities do not necessarily have, all the nuances of communication. So we have to learn them and work with these communities to ensure that, communication is actually effective as communicators. We are winding down to our few minutes and last few minutes. I would invite anyone else who has any final burning questions or comments who may want to pause it now. I think there are lots of resources posted in the chat that you would want to refer to in relation to some of the sessions, some of the case studies that we have just heard. I think it's probably time for me to start just sort of wrapping up, because we want to give you some time to breathe before you rejoin the meet and greet session later, which is via the same platform, unless some of you are in Berlin, who may benefit from perhaps some hors d'oeuvres and some beverages. But for us, we'll just imagine that we're having it as well. just quickly to tie us through from this afternoon earlier on when Dennis Smith, to use a quotation from him, which is actually a verse from Ephesians. He said, our struggle is not against enemies of blood and flesh, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers of this present darkness. Is against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. I think it's a lot for us to mull over, because some of the case studies we heard address the issues of hijacking of public spaces. We also spoke about addressing these darknesses and, of course, reclaiming some of the spaces through community training programs, through media literacy, through some of the research that is being done by all of the agencies in different parts of the world. We're talking about the right to be forgotten. We're speaking about reestablishing rights and so forth for people's data. But I think ultimately the question is how do we reclaim these public spaces? What are the practical options, some of which have been proposed coming out of the group sessions? Again, I want to thank all the presenters for the excellent work that they have done. Some of you may think that is your daily bread, your daily work, but usually to capture all of these months and years of work into 4 or 5 minutes is always a challenge. And to ensure that you convey the essence of what you do is always a bigger challenge. So I want to thank you. I want to thank our participants, most of all for giving us a listening ear, but I think more critically that they will take away a lot of these messages to their own groups and so forth. I want to thank the people in the engine room, as I call them, in the Caribbean imagery. The engine room is really the rhythm section in the steel band. And if the rhythm section goes off, the steel band is off key and all the music goes off. And what follows the music, including the revelers, are usually out of step. So I want to thank the technical people, the coordinators in the back. I want to extend a special thanks to Jody Matire, who coordinated the WAC working group and did all this work. It's very difficult to list out names, but at least those who made the presentations: Venu, Magali, Sally, Suman, Rania, Elaine. Thank you for your presentations, and I hope, apologies if I miss any names that I should have mentioned. And just a reminder that you join the sessions later today and also to rejoin us tomorrow for the last lap. Thank you once again and have a wonderful evening to all. Bye.